Hello and welcome back. This is We've Got Issues. It is our regular get together amongst a bunch of friends who've known each other for 40 years. We love to take the information that comes up in our text chat and bring it to you guys so we can share in the topics that we think are near and dear to all of our hearts. So as I said, we're a group of friends who've known each other for 40 years. We bring our diverse life experiences, professional experiences, relationship experiences to the topics that many people are talking about today, and today should be no different. But before we jump into it, I want to introduce our esteemed panel of contributors. We've got Ella Neely, who's here in LA.
Happy day.
She is a licensed contractor here in Los Angeles. And we got Darren Gray, who is an administrator and educator at USC.
Right on.
That's right. And we've got our good man, Ron Evans, who's a fintech executive back in the DC area.
Peace.
That's right. Right on as usual. And Ella and Darren and Ron and I all came together around our college years. Darren and I and Ron went to USC. Ella went to Mills College, right? Was it Mills College? Yeah. But we were all connected through various connections. And here we are now to kind of go through this life together. As I'm sure you and many of your friends are going through life together in your own way. So every week, one of us brings the topic du jour. And this week, Darren is going to be on deck to take us through what's on his mind. Please take it away, sir.
So today I want to talk about agility quotient. There's a term I learned this week. I shared it out in our group text just so folks would know this was something new. And it really is your mental processing speed, your ability to pivot and deal with the changes that happen in real time. Have a little clip on it. So Nick, if you can roll tape.
Will do.
Everyone talks about IQ and EQ, but in 2026, the skill that decides your future is AQ, your agility quotient. In AQ, Liz Tran's idea is simple. If you can adapt faster than life changes, you win. Here are 3 ways to train your AQ. 1, stop asking, what's the plan? And start asking, what's the next best move? 2, build small experiments. Test a habit for 7 days instead of making a forever decision. 3, upgrade your identity. I'm the kind of person who learns fast beats. I'm not good at that. If you feel stuck, you don't need more motivation. You need more agility. Comment AQ, and I'll drop part 2 with a 7-day agility challenge.
So the IQ was a big thing going up, probably when we were growing up, and then recently EQ. In fact, I think we even had a podcast on it, which is your emotional quotient. Your agility quotient is how fast you can adapt to an ever-changing world, whether it's at work or even in the social political context. It's your ability to pivot when something changes and you're able to stay ahead of it. Oftentimes, it requires you to unlearn old habits. It requires you to take a different perspective, to look at, well, what happens if I do this differently? Like he said, not necessarily having a plan, really thinking about what's the best move. And there's been quite a bit of literature in the last 5 years over it, so I was surprised I hadn't heard of it. And the archetypes for the AQ, your agility quotient, fall into 4. The first is the astronaut. That's somebody who is fast, bold, they're driven by passion. They experiment quickly, but sometimes they're not, they don't pay attention to a lot of details. Then you have your firefighter, the one that thrives under pressure, excelling in crisis and chaos. They're great at reacting to problems, but they're not they don't do a lot of planning. You have the novelist who's highly proactive and strategic. They're great at creating narratives and setting goals, but they struggle sometimes when reality forces them off script. And then you have your neurosurgeon. That's the precise, methodical, and reliable. They're cautious. They rely on the experience and the research, sometimes known as analysis paralysis, because they can be slow to adapt in highly chaotic situations. So given that, my question to you all is, which of those architects do you most closely identify with? And I'll start with our host, Nick. Where do you identify?
Okay. So I'm not completely positive I digested the totality of each different one. I'm pretty sure I'm not the neurosurgeon. What was the traits of the novelist again?
The novelist is they're strategic planners. They're really good at creating plans and narratives and setting goals. But when things change a bit, they have a harder time adapting.
Okay, that's we're getting warmer. Then firefighter.
Firefighters, they're cool as cucumbers under pressure. They don't crack. They're always able to see themselves through the changing situation, but they don't do as well in planning. So they thrive in chaos, not necessarily in the mundane.
Okay, and then the astronaut one more time.
The astronaut is passion. They're looking for the best way to do something. They're always looking for the quick fix and how to resolve a problem, but they sometimes struggle with the details or follow through.
Okay. I'm the astronaut novelist. But in fairness,
I'm not firefighter, novelist, and neurosurgeon all in one.
Exactly.
As Ron would say, don't change the question.
Right.
No,
I'm gonna play it fair. I'm gonna play it fair. You got to choose one. I'm probably the astronaut. I do a good bit of planning, but not necessarily deep, like long range planning. I come to things with a lot of passion and so forth, and I'm willing to kind of like take the risk and put myself out there. So all things being equal, I think we all probably have a little bit of all of these, but I probably lean more astronaut.
Ella?
The neurosurgeon will be the closest for me.
And why is that?
Because I'm good with planning. Pretty not real risk taker on some level, cautious, relying on experience and research, and can be slow to adapt to AI. So it's that, so I'm slow to adapt to moving, what's new and moving us forward.
Ron?
So I am absolutely the novelist, as I hold my work planner, not to be confused with my personal planner, which in the middle is my field notes.
Yeah.
Well, the journal too. Field notes, so I can put this in my pocket in case I need to think about something or take a quick note. I am an obsessive, goal-seeking person that looks for how do we get to X, Y, and Z goals. And I love the planning process. I love the mental challenge of planning for the next 3 months, 3 years. And where I do struggle is something happened to derail that plan. I get a certain way emotionally when that happens.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Yes, and like you, I think I fall into the novelist. At one point, I had 3 different project management tools: Asana, ClickUp, and Trello, and my Google Calendar. And I focus a lot on, and Todoist as well. I focus a lot on getting things and looking out at every possible scenario so that I'm not taken off. I do get a little disappointed when I'm caught off guard because I thought I planned for every possible scenario, even with things going wrong, and something comes out. What's the expression? You want to make God laugh, have a plan or something.
Plan, God laughs.
Yeah. So in looking at your AQ and thinking about your archetype, what are some things that you can do? He talked about creating a 7-day plan. What are some things that you can do? Think in terms of your career goals and your personal goals that would improve your AQ, your ability to pivot, your ability to not get stuck in doing the way things that you've done all your life. And so Ron? Starting with you, how well do you pivot? How can you make yourself pivot better?
I pivot like an oil tanker. so, because I've decided that the goal is worth the effort.
It's to what?
The goal is worth the effort.
Oh, okay.
Or the goal is worth the journey. So now I have to pivot. And that's hard. That's really hard. I think that what I have to do, and I need to work on, because we're talking about like retirement goals right now, and I have to understand that there's choices we have to make that maybe are optimal in the short run, but it's okay if they're not optimal in the long run, and it's okay to have a good decision that you can then change. And it's that change part that I need to work on. I want to ruminate and stew on, no. I want the optimal answer here. And in the meantime, I could be overlooking some good answers that would make everyone happy, and we move forward.
Yeah.
So you have to move. Is that what you're saying? You have to do something. Because are you saying that you stay until you have processed it?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I would say that I look at if I've already anchored. Okay, so I'll give an example. If I've anchored myself to wanting to live in Italy for part of the year, I'm locked in on Italy. I'm going to the State Department. I'm going to all the various sites that would tell me how an expat could move to Italy. But if then you said, well, Italy changed their laws and it's now not advantageous, it's like, well, how dare they?
It messed up my plans.
It messed up my plan. And it's like, I need to be able to say, you know what? That was a good plan, but something happened. Come up with another one, pivot to another one. And I'm like, I lament but that was a really good plan. And it's like, no. There's a famous book, Who Moved My Cheese? And I need to understand, when your cheese moves,
you gotta
move. Yeah, you gotta. Yeah. So I think that's where I struggle and where an area I need to work on.
And Ella, as a business owner and as a contractor, I'm sure you have to deal with changes all the time. How well do you pivot when things aren't going as well as you had hoped on your work site or with a client? How well do you pivot? What is your AQ?
I don't have a choice. I have to pivot. One of my workers called me and said at the time they were supposed to come, and they had a lot of responsibility that they weren't going to show up. Then now on that dime, I'm pivoting and replacing them with somebody else. I mean, it's in a work situation. It's how well do I pivot? I pivot very well because I don't have a choice. I have to pivot. I have to get these things done. I have obligations. They could be personal. They could be financial. And when your back is up against a wall, you got to do whatever it takes to get the job done. So I pivot very well.
Now, does that translate into your non-work life?
Yeah. I mean, I think if it's a muscle that has to grow, and then it just grows through all the different aspects of your life. Now, there's some things that I don't feel like doing, so I don't pivot as fast as I want to, like the AI. I was sincere when I said that. Yeah, that's one that I need to embrace, and I have not embraced it yet.
What about technology in general? AI. Is it technology in general, or is it AI in particular?
Technology in general.
Gotcha. Now, Nick,
a lot of it has to do with time. I don't have a lot of time, and so if somebody is not like for instance, setting up this mic and all this kind of stuff for this podcast, if my time is limited and then I only have my expertise, which is limited, then it's hard to. I need support. I need somebody to show me the way, because what I'm doing is not productive and it's wasting time. So I need to surround myself with people who can help me get to that next step, especially in technology, because I don't know what I don't know.
Right, Nick, I want to come at you from an entirely different angle.
Sure.
Social political. How well what is your AQ when it comes to, let's say, what goes on in the world in your perception of the social political? Because I know you tend to be real engaged in the whole global political. So I know as a business owner, like, oh, you have to pivot because, you know, that's your livelihood. But in terms of your passions toward, you know, politics and your thoughts, how well do you pivot to the changing world?
Yeah. I think that my philosophy on it all is that there are things that are in my control and there are things that are not in my control, right? And so the things that are not in my control, I can philosophize about, I can, you know, espouse opinions about, but the way that I have to pivot to what is happening more globally and implement change in my personal life, I think I'm pretty good at, right? I feel like if it has to do with how I am invested, or if it has to do with how AI or whatnot is going to affect my livelihood, or how the administration's, you know, policies and corruption and things that I feel are going on, how they affect me, I try to keep those things in perspective. And so I just have to do personally what I think is going to be most beneficial for me and those who I love, you know, in light of that. So I think those things are easier to pivot than things that are closer to home.
Well, one struggle I have is my AQ and my EQ are often in conflict with each other, where I'm trying to pivot and trying to deal with the changing circumstances. And I'm able to do that, you know, without much loss on my end. But I lose patience with having to bring other people along because they don't necessarily have that same level of agility. And so my EQ drops significantly because I become annoyed when someone isn't changing. I'll give you a for instance. In talking to one of my grad students, I told him to reach out to some faculty members. And he said, I'm going to email them. And I said, they don't respond to emails. You need to go visit them during their office hours. And then he responded and said, I'll email them to find out when their office hours are. And, you know, thankfully it was through Slack because I cursed under my breath because, you know, understanding that you need to reach out differently, he couldn't make that adjustment. And so my empathy just, you know, it plummeted. And, you know, I'm, you know, thinking of all sorts of insults and things about my student because my EQ dropped. So I was wondering, now that you know what you know about AQ, how does it impact anyone's EQ, your ability to empathize? And if you're good at pivoting and changing, how do you deal with the people around you who do not necessarily have that level of skill?
Did you ask him if he had a problem with talking to people? I mean,
I did not. I did not ask him that.
Well, because that would be if he's like pushing like you know, the internet and stuff, then do you feel comfortable talking to these people? I mean, that would be like the next kind of question, to like not assume anything, but to try to understand how he communicates and what's, you know what I mean? And to kind of like dive into that and not get irritated by him not doing it the way you told him to do it.
Yeah, and that's what I've been working on. I think we talked about that in a previous podcast about being able to be in the other person's listening. But what I did, I gave him guidance, and I said, because they don't read emails, you should go to the office to find out when their office hours are. And so I was more solution oriented, but that was more of an IQ thing of here's what to do, not an EQ thing of let me dig deeper into why he would respond that way and not even see how what he responded was in direct conflict to what I had just said. So I didn't do that.
I mean, I think that what you did is you were very descriptive, and you said, this is exactly what I want you to do. And you were frustrated when he didn't go over and get the office hours, figure it out away from email. I think that in that scenario, it's got to be hard because you're like, I know how to do it. I could do it myself, but I've delegated it to someone and they're not as smart as I am, or they don't have as much experience as I have. Therefore, I'm frustrated. And I think that it's normal to feel that way, but it's also a teachable moment where you can mentor someone and say, you know what, based on our experience, that's not going to work. Do you have any ideas on another way that doesn't involve email to get the information we need?
Yeah.
And I have a situation. I actually told a family member of mine to call Greg, our friend, to ask him, to kind of get some mentorship. And I had advised him a couple times, and he did. I said, well, what are you, are you afraid of something? And he said, well, I don't know what to say. And then I was then able to, this was after, having it happen a couple times and him not doing it. Then I just start kind of like diving deeper because we are older than these people. We have more experience, and we make assumptions as to that they have the agility, that they have the confidence to go out and do these things. And then when you start like asking them, well, how can I serve you? And what additional information do you need? Then they feel open enough to say, oh, I need help.
Ella brings up a point that I think is worthy of throwing back to you, Darren, as to whether AQ is any more important than IQ or EQ, right? Like having any one without the others, on some level is equally bad as not having any of them. You know what I mean?
Well, I definitely think you need to have, of course, IQ because you need to know stuff, and then EQ in order to relate. But I think AQ, because of our rapidly changing world, is something that you really need. If you had to give up one, then I would probably give up EQ. I wouldn't give up IQ, but I think the agility quotient, because things change so fast. When my boss is retiring after 21 years, he's leaving as the dean, and he's a great dean. He's going back into research, and a lot of people were concerned because I've got a really good relationship with him, and he's been an advocate. And someone says, "How do you feel?" And I said, "The king is dead. Long live the king," which is, what does the new boss want? Because that's what I'm going to work on. It's not.
Wait, was that really your first response?
Yes, that was my first response. The king is dead. Long live the king. Yes.
You continue to amaze us.
Because that's my question as to whether EQ is any less important than AQ, right?
Well, the reality is, if I'm going to continue to thrive, I need to align myself with whoever the new boss is, right? Mm-hmm. And some of my colleagues, when the university went through its changes in terms of reductions and budgets and changes and getting rid of DEI, there were a lot of people who stood up and fought the good fight. And then when the layoffs came, they got laid off. I said, what's it going to take for me to keep doing what I do? And
you've already established in the previous episode, you're not really about any creature comforts. Yes, you've been very clear on that one.
Well, that is my AQ, which is, adapting to the environment that is.
Okay.
Not there is a lack of empathy in this man.
Dude, that's the EQ part.
Ella, to the last chapter. Let's read a few more chapters before we get to the conclusion. So let me ask you a question, Darren. When the dean announced that he was going to retire, and you turned to your team and said,
not my team, somebody who reached out to me.
Okay. When you turned to that person and said, The king is dead. Long live the king. Okay. What do you think they thought about your commitment to the dean and the person versus what you said?
Well, they were shocked for sure, because they thought I was going to have more of an emotional response. But in my mind, well, the decision's already been made. It's not like I can't still see him outside of work. I can talk to him and call him. It's just that his vision is no longer the vision of the school. So I need to align myself with the vision of the new guy.
And the mourning period lasted as long as they changed the nameplate on the door. And then you said, okay, whoever that guy was, I don't remember him. And now I serve a new master.
I wouldn't phrase it that way, but that's the
You might want
intent.
to sit on that one for a while, Darren. You might want to sit on that one.
Well, I'll give you another, for instance, when the whole diversity came out and they scraped the Center for Engineering Diversity, they scraped it off the glass. There was nothing to be done other than all right, the Trump administration says we can't use the word DEI anymore, so I'm not going to use it. I scrubbed my website too. It just, because that's the reality. I have to exist in the reality of what is.
Did you communicate how you felt about that to any of your team or peers?
To some degree, it's like, that sucks, but there's nothing to be done. Having that, that mourning or anything doesn't change the needs that are in the community. Having the words on the window doesn't change us teaching kids in South LA how to launch rockets. What's most important is teaching the kids in LA how to launch rockets, not what's on the window glass.
As is often the case, I have a certain level of empathy and relating to Darren's philosophy.
You guys are so unempathetic, both of you.
The reason why is I grew up in the entertainment business, which is one of the most mendacious, follow the bouncing ball of power kind of industries that you can be in, right? And things change constantly. So where I learned the muscle of agility in terms of dealing with change was in that industry. And so I understand the value of showing, allegiance to the goals of whoever's in power at the moment. Doesn't mean, I think the thing that is missing in your at least representation of what happened is that functionally, sure, you have to deal with whoever's in power. Personally speaking, though, when you're talking to a colleague or whatever, and you show no level of, whatever about the person who was 21 years in the chair and you spent a certain amount of time with before you said the king is dead, now long live the king. I think there seems to be a disconnect. So my question to you is, professionally, I understand what you're saying, but personally, you had no level of, whatever. Did you shut it off like a light switch, personally as well as professionally?
Well, not personally. I've seen him a couple of times since, and we've talked and everything. Not personally, but like Ron said, that he moves like an oil tanker. I move like a canoe. It's just rotating right there to pivot to whatever is necessary to keep achieving that mission.
Well, wait, hang on. No, wait. You're confusing execution with emotion. When we get a new boss, we have to go follow the new boss's goals and vision. That's how you keep getting the paycheck.
Yeah.
But you can also have emotions about either the personality of the boss that's no longer your boss. Maybe you like that person. They were good to you. They had a good strategy. The new boss maybe has a bad reputation. A good reputation doesn't matter. It's a wait and see. But you always have to execute the mission. But when someone comes up to you in the hallway and they say, hey, Joe's no longer the CEO or the head of the department, how you doing? It's like, man, I really liked him. I really did. It sucks. I mean, I know we got a new boss. I'll give him a shot. We'll make sure everything's good. but there's got to be some ability to say, you know what, I hurt. I like
feel,
that.
I have a feeling.
I have a yeah.
You know, it didn't even dawn on me to say that. I'll give you another example.
Because he didn't
But we
feel
don't need
that.
any more. I mean, that was two, right?
No, but like when
let him go, please. I'm fascinated.
So like when in 2016 when Trump won the election, you know, a lot of my liberal friends, you know, reached out and said, "How are you feeling?" And I said, "I feel like it's Wednesday," because nothing has changed in my life. The country is still the way the country is. And so, you know, and I didn't realize until much later how hurt a lot of my left-leaning friends were, because they were really calling legitimately to check on me, but emotionally, I had no response at all. It was like, okay, the country is the way the country is, and so that's
fix that. Can't fix that. Listen, I want to, again, because I'm always mindful that when we go down the Darren rabbit hole, that rabbit hole is deep. So I don't want to get caught too far down there, right? You might not be able to get back out. But
wrapping it up, you know, and it really, AQ is just that ability to turn on the dime, and you know, from my perspective, is to turn on the dime and deal with what's next. And so, like Ron, I'm more of the novelist. I plan, but I over plan for every possible contingency that could possibly go wrong. And then I'm surprised when I don't when I go, I should have thought about that. That does frustrate me.
Mm-hmm.
I am interested though, because, and maybe this is just the change of the times, that EQ for many years, and you can look back historically, if you watched Game of Thrones, right? EQ was often more powerful than IQ or AQ, right? The Hand of the King was often more had more value than the king himself or the guy who's the best warrior, because he was the one that survived, right? The one who could get into the heads of all the other people and understand. Mm-hmm. Are you saying, and for people who are listening, are you recommending to them that optimizing for AQ now, regardless of how much EQ you have, is actually more important?
I think it is, because when you look at AI, you look at the change in the world around us. You know, when you look at how things are changing rapidly from day to day on the global scale, you have to be able to adjust. I know you guys tease me about my wartime stocks and you know my death financial package, but in reality, if you have oil stocks right now, you're doing better. So being able to adjust. I'm just using that as an example, right? I'm not going to go down, but what I'm saying is
trying to rehash old arguments and score points.
No, I'm just giving an example of, I think, being able to pivot, because the world is changing so fast, and you have to be able to keep up, or you're going to get left behind.
Right.
You know,
I do see that
being called vibe coding now, where you can tell AI to write a program or create an app for you, and it'll do it for you. So a lot of the programmers are unemployed now because they know how to code, but now you've got, you know, a 17-year-old vibe coding. And so if you don't understand vibe coding, then you will be an unemployed coder. So the world has just changed so fast that you have to be able to pivot like that.
Yep. Connect the dots for me, because I'm a little slow today. How was your doubling down on oil stocks related to this topic?
Moving my portfolio to follow what's happening in the world. Not speculative stocks, but saying, all right, there's this massive buildup happening in Venezuela, and now there's a massive buildup happening in the Arabian Sea. I need to be in a position to where maybe I would invest in those industries that will benefit from that, not in a speculative but actually just following the geopolitical ramification. Maybe I need to go in Raytheon because they need to build more Tomahawk missiles, because that's the posture we're in. If there were a Democrat administration, I would do something different. So that's what I mean in terms of like your investments in being in AQ, is watching where things are going to see where you should be in a position of.
I think that, obviously on a pragmatic level, it all makes sense. I just wonder.
Ella laughs at me. Go ahead.
And for Ella,
So,
in the position that you're in, right? Like, I mean, the relevance of this conversation for someone like you or for me, whose livelihood is based on how well we can adjust to market conditions, economic conditions and whatnot. I think about it from the standpoint of being a realtor, right? Like, how is technology going to eat into my ability to do what I do? Is it going to be a help or is it going to be a hindrance? At this point, it's a help. But I know that from a corporate standpoint, and this is for people who are in that arena, the statement, like, it's becoming nakedly apparent that the golden goose for corporations is to have as few people on the payroll as possible. I don't care what industry you're in, right? Like, it used to be that, hey, creating jobs is what it's all about. Now the selling point of AI and all these other companies is that you're going to be able to do more with fewer people, and stocks shoot up accordingly.
Yep.
So I'm sure you're following that from your stock portfolio too, Darren. Is that who's forecasting to have the least, do the most layoffs, right?
Exactly. Well, Meta's about to lay off 20%.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, like, even as a person who could be impacted, there are things that AI cannot do that you need to have that agility. AI does not have curiosity, empathy, imagination, or experience. And so you need to lean into those areas as a worker to make sure that in the future you can adjust what your skill set is to that, so that you're not displaced by AI. Your ability to not read the tea leaves, but look at the direction of your company. You can, like I said, with the vibe coding, you need to figure out how you can fit into that mode so that you're not spending 5 years getting your master's degree in computer science and then being unemployed because an AI or some kid can do the exact same thing. So you have to be agile and say, all right, well, where can I do this? Maybe I need to be a consultant for other people. So there are things that you need to be able to pivot to do, and I think that's more important than your emotional quotient or your IQ has to be baseline. Of course, you have to be like average at least.
Question for the group.
Why does it not surprise me that of the three, Darren doesn't see the full value of emotional intelligence as equal to AQ or IQ? There are so many examples of architects that can't hold a conversation, can't sell an idea. They have a high IQ, but they get upset, they get frustrated, they don't know how to sell into their manager, director, VP, or whatever. IQ is important. You can throw somebody a book, but emotional intelligence is statistically proven to be the way to get ahead in most companies.
I agree with you, and you have to be able to deal with the changing world as well, because your IQ and EQ are based on your current conditions and circumstances. And if all of that shifts and you don't shift with it, then you can have the highest IQ and EQ and you're still out on your tail because you didn't adjust when things are going. When the new CEO comes in and says, we're going to get rid of the metaverse. We spent $80 billion. We're getting rid of the metaverse. And if you don't pivot and say, all right, I'm going to take this and move this into the new glasses, if you don't pivot, then you're out. You can have great EQ on the unemployment line.
Oh, I completely agree. I mean, for those of us of a certain age, and probably only Darren understands these names I'm about to throw out, I started off as a Mac administrator, then became a Novell network administrator, then a Microsoft system administrator. And every time I've had to say, oh, look, that company is losing market share. That's the new 800-pound gorilla. And you have to do it. I completely agree. I always get a little funky when someone says EQ is not the most important thing in the world. That's all.
Yeah. Question for the group. Do you see the forthcoming economy as a game of musical chairs in the sense that there's 10 people playing and maybe 9 or 8 or 7 chairs? This speaks to this agility thing, right? It used to be maybe that there were 9 chairs and 10 players. But it seems to me that, speaking to agility, the future is going to where there's 10 players and maybe only 4 chairs.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that is the future that we're facing, Ron, because you have a big opinion about this, what's most important? EQ, IQ, AQ? How do you balance that out? Even if you agree that that's the future, first of all, do you even agree with that future?
Yeah, no, I do agree. I think that we're going to get into new topics about universal basic income at some point, because there are going to be fewer jobs and more people that are looking for those jobs. I mean, I do agree that, again, if I had the 3, I'm going EQ, AQ, and then IQ last, because I could throw a book at someone and say, read this dang book. It's part of the job. So you do have to be able to pivot. And I think that pivot, I know someone near and dear to me that did not want to hear about AI, And I'm like, you're sticking your head in the sand. Well, because of their performance at work, they were asked to be on this AI task force. And it's like, and she said, yes, thank God, because she needed to pivot and be a part of that, because those were going to be the winners. And if you weren't involved in that, you weren't going to be on the winning side. And that's the AQ part that you have to do. You have to say, you know what? This is the way it's going. Like you said, if there's going to be 4 chairs for 10 people, I need one of those chairs. So that's also why I reject Darren's pessimistic argument about I don't need a college degree, because that was low-key what he was saying, because there will always be a value for an education. You just have to make sure you get one of those 4 chairs, and not everyone's going to get one of the chairs.
Right. So to kind of land this plane, because we started with Ron. Ron, you said EQ, AQ, IQ in that order, right?
Yes.
Okay. Ella, where do you stand on the hierarchy of importance? AQ, IQ, or EQ?
I'm with Ron.
So EQ first, then IQ, then AQ, then IQ.
Yes.
Right? Darren, I think we know where you stand, but just for the record.
AQ, IQ, EQ.
Yes. And I would err with Darren. That AQ is first, IQ is second, and EQ is third. But
why is IQ second for you, Nick?
I think that information, being informed and expert. I think you have to be an expert in something. Like I know you like Scott Galloway, right? Mm-hmm. So Scott Galloway advocates for you've got to be an expert in something. Yep. You've got to have some unique knowledge that other people don't have or can't take away from you. That's what makes it. That's how I'm interpreting IQ. So AQ then allows you to take that unique knowledge set and be able to apply it in a unique way, which makes you valuable. And if you have some level of EQ, then you're going to be well liked. I think the world runs on people who are liked, like Jeffrey Epstein, more than they are necessarily good, right? Like you wouldn't have put Jeffrey Epstein in the category of someone who was a great ethical person, but for whatever reason, people liked him and he was able to do a lot of damage as a result. So, there's something to be said for EQ. You have to have some level of that. You can't be just a knucklehead that people don't like. People have to like you on some level. So that's that. Darren, any final words on the subject before we head over to your party?
I do value EQ. I do. I just have seen lately that the changing world requires a reorient, which is funny because I just sort of came to this EQ thing and I was like, yay! And the coach who introduced me to agility quotient, what she said, because of my EQ and being able to pivot with how I communicate to my students and do it instantaneously, she said that was the value. Being able to not only understand where they're coming from, but change my behavior such that I utilize that to get my goal. She said that was a higher priority for me, was being able to essentially operationalize my EQ, because that's what AQ allowed me to do.
Oh,
Gotcha.
empathetic.
Hmm?
Nothing. Just bring out the emotion of you.
All right, Darren, why don't you, well, before we head to the parting shot, you guys, I'm sure if you've been following along, have your own thoughts and experiences as it relates to this subject of AQ, IQ, and EQ. And so we're interested to hear what your feedback is or your thoughts on the matter, because it's, there's probably not one right way to do it, but they all matter on some level. So definitely engage with us. Let us know your comments on that, and certainly we hope that you'll subscribe and like and share this podcast with others who are also talking about these similar topics. So we appreciate you guys being with us as we head into Darren's parting shot. So Darren, tell us what your final shot for the day is.
Roll the clip first, and then I'll mention it.
Okay.
All right, so in watching the news recently, I was particularly struck by how so many people in the Middle East wear these band collar shirts with suits. They don't wear the collared shirts and the ties. And I was struck by that. I was like, that is a snazzy way to dress. Because, there are like I wear a shirt and tie to work every day. And I just do. And whenever I have to go somewhere that's less formal, I'm always trying to figure out what I want to wear. And I usually end up putting on a polo shirt, but the polo doesn't seem formal enough. Mm-hmm. It's not shirt and tie. I don't like wearing collared shirts that are open. It just reminds me of like 70s, and I'm supposed to have hair coming out like it's. I don't like those. And so I saw, a lot of the Middle Eastern guys with, these nice suits and these collarless shirts. And so I just thought those were cool. So I just bought a couple. And so I'm just adding to my wardrobe. So that was just something I just was fascinated by.
That's
Darren on GQ.
Yeah. What was the name of the clothing company?
Oh gosh.
You can get bandit collar shirts.
I just got that off of I just went through Amazon.
I'm sorry, I'm a techie. Bandit collar? Is that what you said?
Bandit collar, BANDE. And those are different
like
from
a preacher.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And there's another one, a Mandarin collar, which is slightly different. It doesn't close. The bandit collars button all the way to the top. The Mandarin collars have a little bit of a opening here. I like the bandit more than the Mandarin, but I just was fascinated by how sharp they look. And I was like, wow, that is looking, because they were crisp, but they didn't have the tie on it. I know there's like a whole Eastern Western thing. There's all sorts of connotations behind it, but I was just taken aback at how sharp they looked.
You gotta send him a subscription to a male fashion magazine.
Exactly. Darren, a little bit late to the party, but
I guess you're welcome.
I'm really late. I don't know what they were.
But I've not seen people walking around LA with those. I've not seen anybody wear those.
Really? Really? I have a few of those in my closet for sure. Yeah, man. But hey, that
good for you.
Darren's a traditionalist. Every time I see him out, he's got the tie on and whatnot, and Ron, I know you like your print shirts and stuff, so that's your version of getting dressed.
Be
up.
nice.
No, I mean, I'm not. Am I wrong?
You wear a lot of print, Ron.
You said prints?
Print, like it's a print.
No, I mean,
it's like a pattern.
No. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I wear Bonobos, but no, we wear like soft collar shirts. I'm in tech, No,
I'm talking about if you were to go out and you had a suit on, would you typically wear a solid colored shirt, or would you wear a print color shirt?
Solid color, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Although fun fashion fact, I just bought my 3rd pair of jeans yesterday. So now I have 3 pair. So
I've got
you
one.
You didn't have jeans before?
I only had 2 pair. I mean, I work in sweats most days.
Yeah, I
You know,
have
it's funny.
one.
My father never had a pair of jeans.
Mm.
Never saw him in jeans.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when I go on the road, I wear jeans to the offices, but when I'm at home, it's always sweats. Yeah.
What happens when you get called into a meeting? Do you have like a suit in your office that you can change into right quick?
No, when I go to Atlanta, I bring the button down shirts and the blue jeans, and I play the role. But for when I'm working from home, this is all you see.
Yeah.
So it's fine.
Right.
I'm just curious. Yeah, but that was my parting shot, Nick.
All right.
I'm gonna have my suspenders, and I'm all excited about what I'm gonna be wearing. So
Okay. All right. Suspenders and belts and suspenders, I'm sure.
yeah,
Right?
that's what I'm.
All right. All right. Well, hey, he's leveling up, people. Leveling up. Good to hear. Good to hear. So now you've had your guys. If you're not up on it, bandit collar shirts. You've heard it here. Darren Gray, bandit collar shirts are the new thing. So appreciate the fashion tip as well as the AQ conversation. And if you guys have gotten something out of this, I hope you'll give us a like and a follow, and that you'll share with those who are out there who may be similarly inclined. So thank you guys again for your educated and well-spoken opinions about this subject, and I can't wait for us to do it again. So we'll see you guys next time. This is We've Got Issues. We'll see you soon.